Thank you. Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting. So this is a public meeting which is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. We'll start with declarations of interest. So does anyone have any declarations of interest? Judy?
Thank you, Chair. I have a declaration of interest under the item 10, Sprowston Town Council SIL loan. As I'm Vice Chairman of Sprowston Town Council, but I have spoken to the monitoring officer and I gather I can speak and vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Fran?
Thank you, Chairman. The same item, I'm a member of Rackheath Community Council who have also had funds from this. So just another interest, just to be clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If anyone else does discover anything as we go forward, please do raise it appropriately. I don't believe we have any apologies for absence. Looks like everybody's here tonight. So that's good. We then have the minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 20th of April. At page 7, and tend to take those on block. So now's your chance to say if there's anything wrong, needs adding, deleting, changing, updating. Okay, can I take those as being? Okay, I will sign those off. Thank you. Are there any matters arising for anybody in those minutes? Fran?
Thank you, Chairman. There's item 225 on the minutes around social prescribing. I just wanted to make people aware that I'm very pleased to say that we now have 2 community connectors in post, one of whom was previously in the social prescribing team in South Norfolk, and also someone from the housing team. So people who have got a good deal of experience to bring to Broadland. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Judy?
Thank you. Under minute 223, the environmental coordinator, Kirsty Burns, is now in post and has made a good start in establishing what needs to be done and starting to make relationships with the other departments and stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the update on that. Anything for anybody else?
Yes, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Joe.
233, the lease on St Faith's Common, I believe that's in place, and I visited the park with the volunteer team the other day and they're doing a great job. Thank you.
I would imagine that looks great in the sunshine, doesn't it? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the update on that. Okay. I got one on my list, which was, you'll be pleased to hear, around member IT. Minute 228. Guess I just got a question there. Looking at the notes, we looked like we were coming forward with a workshop and a survey. Do we have any idea where we are with dates on that at this point in time? Shall I ask Emma or Jonathan? Any joy?
Yeah, so as discussed, we will do it now. Everyone is on the new Office 365 environment, hooray. And hopefully you're realising the benefits of it, and we are picking up issues and dealing with those as we work through. The team will now work on a survey to go out to members, and then as agreed, we'll bring that back through the reporting channels. I think it will be October Cabinet just because of the summer break, and to be really realistic with the work the team are doing on Office 365 for officers, because they're going to be fully involved in that through July and August. So into October Cabinet is the plan at present.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so that then moves us on to public speaking. I don't believe there's
no
public speaking this evening. And representation from non-cabinet members. I see we have a couple in today. So if there's anything you want to say, if you can indicate at the right point in time, and if it's appropriate, I will bring you in if possible. So do let me know. Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I see we have the chairman in today. Good evening, Stephen. From your point of view, did you want to say anything now, or did you want to do it as we go through?
Two items where we've got variance to the officer's recommendation. So again, just to save time for yourselves in regards to that, I won't reiterate the ones that are just commensurate with the original officer's recommendations, only the ones that are amended. And when we get to those, I'll obviously amplify, Sean.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thank you for that. Okay, so that brings us on then to item 8 at page 21, which is the Wellbeing Policy Development Panel. So over to you, Fran.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just want to ask the meeting to receive the minutes of the Wellbeing Panel. The actual item, which there are recommendations for here, actually will be discussed on item 12. So I've not put anything forward right now. Okay, so we can discuss it then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Fran. We will pick up those items at that point. So that moves us. Page 25? Yeah, I seem to have lost some in there. No, it's on the, yeah, it's fooled me, it was on the back. Okay, so move on then to item 9, which is the COVID-19 recovery plan at page 25. Jamie, are you leading on this one?
I will do, Chair, if that's okay.
All yours then.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everybody. So this is the second part, I guess, of a two-part report. At the previous Cabinet, colleagues will remember that you received and endorsed a report that was looking backwards in terms of our COVID response, and particularly with an emphasis upon the money that had been requested from the various sources of funding and bequeathed to us, how they've been allocated, and gave a progress update against our COVID recovery plan that was written in the summer of last year. Obviously, the summer of last year was between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2, so was written in very much in that context. This report is more forward-looking. So obviously, councillors will be aware that whilst the pandemic itself is not yet completely off our agenda, it's certainly at a better stage than it was over the Christmas period, over winter. And this report is both intended to show how we are looking to deploy resources, both to continue to manage the pandemic and its response activity, but also with an eye towards recovery into the new, this new and I guess beyond financial years. It's fair to say that the amount of money offered to us to assist us with our COVID recovery and response efforts has been significant and fairly complicated. There are two predominant sources of funding. One is the Containing Outbreak Management Fund, which has come via Norfolk County Council Public Health. And I guess the clue is in the title. Its intention is to help put in place the right instruments to help contain and manage the pandemic itself. However, we've also been given a significant amount of money directly from government, what is called in this report unring-fenced COVID grants. Beyond that, there are a number of other sources of income which are detailed in the report, those being the two particular ones, but other specific fundings around business grants, economic activity, social isolation payments, etc., all detailed in the appendices for your awareness. The report is looking to detail along the same usual themes that we use in in previous recovery plans, also in our delivery plan, by looking at our community response, our support of the economy and skills agenda, and then also our organisational recovery, the issues that we think we're facing, and the detail of the activities we would therefore like to or suggest that we put in place to help progress and support the organisation, but more importantly, our communities and our businesses. And then detail against the funding we've indicated might be necessary to support those activities. It's important on that point of funding to say these are indicative sums of money. So again, councillors will be aware that the policy environment around COVID has been ever changing. Things feel a little bit more stable now than perhaps they did this time last year. However, there is still the need to be quite reactive and responsive in the way that we're dealing with what is thrown at us, both from the pandemic itself, but also some of the requirements made of us as an organisation by government. So indicative budgets, meaning that we recognise there might be some need for fluidity in the way that we actually commit resources, and that would need to be that's requested to be at the discretion of the respective director in consultation with portfolio. And obviously the actual application of costs would need to divert back to the standard 45-55 split that we are accustomed to using in terms of our own collaborative efforts, unless there's a good and rationale reason for moving away from that formula. So Chair, I don't think I wanted to say anything more by way of introduction, but more than happy to try and take any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you for that, Jamie. Again, just picking up on the different aspects there, to say thank you for bringing this together. It's useful to see all of the funding in one place so that you can actually now see what's coming through from the various different schemes and different things that have been available, from the hardship fund to the track and trace, to name but two, but there's so many there. Thank you for just clarifying around the 45-55 split. That was useful, because I did note in the table at 4.4 the split is slightly different, but as you say, they're just indicative numbers, so we just need to reflect those in the right way when we bring that back and see that as it's appropriately done. It would also be useful when we do that if we look at Appendix A, because again that doesn't show total number. The way it shows it is slightly different. And it only has a total number at the bottom. So again, it would be just useful if we could have the total number in the column rather than the split number. That's just useful to see what we're spending there in total. So I think that would be useful to have those two things. Again, just picking up on the recommendations there to consider and approve the proposed actions as set out in the attached COVID-19 Recovery Plan 21-22. Which details out what the key actions we're looking to take. And there are extensive actions there, which is good to see that we're proactive and acting in a lot of different areas. Although I'm sure there will be things added to that list as we go forward and as we discover more things that we need to do and need to work in that space. And then the second recommendation is there at 7.2, which is to improve the indicative sums set out in Appendix A and Table 4.4, to provide further support for the COVID-19 recovery and to delegate to the relevant director in consultation with the appropriate portfolio holder in order to utilise the funding flexibly and to ensure the greatest impact. And again, that just picks up on what was said there around the split should be where appropriately it is done, the 45-55. So it would be useful, again, if we could just at some point have those numbers come back, just so we can just see that how they're reflected in the appropriate way. That would be good to see. So they're the two recommendations for you. I don't know, Trudy, if there's anything you want to add from a finance point of view?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just really pleased to see this come back because it's been so confusing, money coming in, hasn't it, though? And we've agreed money and we think, well, has that already been here? And to see it all in one place, I applaud you for getting this together because it's so complicated. I, too, had the table at 4.4 highlighted. Why is this not a 55-45 split? But obviously you've clarified that now. So no, I just welcome the report and just seeing everything in one place. And I know you've got loads to get on with. So the sooner we get this approved, the better. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for anybody? No? Joe?
Yeah, thanks for this, Jamie. It is an amazing piece of work, and the list in 4.4 is so comprehensive. The work that we've been doing is fantastic to support the COVID recovery. So I just want to thank all the staff involved and just say what a great job our one team is doing across both the districts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Joe. Anything for anybody else? No? Oh, sorry, Judy?
A small point, and I just wondered if the director was in a position to tell us any more about hybrid meetings, and are we likely to move to those at some point? Thank you.
Hey, great question. Just as if the world wasn't complicated enough already. Have I bought you enough time there, Debbie?
You have, Chair, if I can actually turn the microphone on. Yes, unfortunately, as you're probably aware, there was a legal challenge around whether we could continue to have hybrid meetings because the emergency legislation put in place came to an end and expired. Unfortunately, that legal challenge wasn't successful, hence why we've had to revert to face-to-face meetings. There has been a call out for evidence from the LGA to put forward the case for hybrid meetings. and we will follow that with interest in due course. We are obviously investing in the technology to allow us to stream the meetings tonight, and that at the moment we're piloting that, making sure that works, with a view later on to perhaps letting people join by Zoom. However, as I say, in terms of actual statutory decisions, they have to be made in person at the moment, in face-to-face. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you for clarifying that. Fran?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask a question, Jamie. Are we still on track for our 2 mental health workers? 4 mental health workers, aren't we? Across the 2 areas.
Yes, we are.
July.
We are, Councillor Weinmark. So just for colleagues' awareness of what Fran's asking about, we've engaged with the YMCA in terms of letting contracts to provide the support for young people, mental health, recognising that's been a real consequence of the pandemic. We're looking to get that contract in at pace, clearly, because there's a backlog of support and work needed there. So yeah, we are very much on track with that, and look forward to working with the YMCA.
Thank you for answering that. It's a bit like being on mute, isn't it? Forgetting to put your microphone on. It's a whole new world. It's a different place to be at. Yeah. Okay. So if there are no more questions, we'll move to the vote, which you'll be glad to know is not by roll call. So all those in favour of recommendation 7.1, 7.2 on page 31. It's unanimous, Chair. Thank you, James. Okay, so that then moves us on to item 10 at page 34, which is the bid to the Community Infrastructure Fund from Sprowston Town Council. So you, Phil? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You've seen these before. I think this is the 4th bid that we've now received as a council. It's a bid for £250,000. It's a forward loan to the town council that is then underwritten by future SIL receipts. The calculations are in the report and the appendices, showing that money will be forthcoming. There was a £500,000 pot put aside some time ago to be able to draw down these loans to help communities forward fund infrastructure in their respective areas. This loan will then take that fund down to £43,000. But again, as the report explains, it is likely to be recycled fairly quickly, both from Rackheath and also from Sprowston. All the requirements that are set out for this loan, as far as officers are concerned, have been satisfied. There's a legal agreement that will be drafted, and that is in the recommendations to progress with that legal agreement and agree this loan. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that, Phil. Joe? Thank you for that. Okay, any questions from anyone? Judy?
I haven't got a particular question, but I just want to record my thanks to Sally Hall for her help with this. It's a rather, not quite a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Sprowston, but we don't very often get the opportunity to buy a building. We have done it before with the Diamond Centre, and it will be, when complete, when refurbished and extended a bit, it will be a great asset for the area. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Judy. Yeah, I'd just like to say much the same thing. I mean, this is exactly what this fund is about. That's why we created it many moons ago, to enable communities to draw down and do the infrastructure effectively before the SIL payments came forward. And it's great to see yet another town council coming forward and wanting to make use of the facility. I guess the only thing in there that we just need to be aware of is the fund running low and we don't get the money back for whatever reason, then obviously we would still encourage other ventures to come forward, and no doubt we would look and see if we could facilitate that and enhance the fund. So be assured, I think that we would want to continue these things coming forward as they have been. So, okay, so we have recommendations. Joe, did you want to do the recommendations? Okay. All right. Well, the recommendations are at page 37, 8.1, 1, 2, and 3. All those in favour? Thank you, James. Okay, so that moves us on then to the strategic performance and finance report for quarter 4. Debbie, who pointed at you. Okay, I'll hand over to you to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a bit of a double act with myself and Sinead, but I'm going to take you through the finance element first of all. Slightly different presentation to normal, and I think because this was the outturn report, we actually wanted to show the impact of COVID that we've had actually on our finances this year in what has been an extremely unusual year for us trying to budget financially. So on page 42, there's a table at 3.4. That is the amount of money that we've had flowed through us, mainly from the government over the last year, and that's nearly £43 million. The vast majority of that we paid out in year to businesses to give them that support. I think, the team did a grand job actually getting that money out the door as quickly as they could. But you'll see at the bottom of that table, there was just over £1.25 million of funds that we haven't yet spent, and we would like that to be carried forward in a new earmarked reserve. And in fact, that will fund a lot of the recovery plan that you've already just agreed on this agenda just now. So you can see there that there's a little bit remaining on there, and particularly on the line that was the emergency funding that we got from local government to support us as an organisation in delivering that support to our residents. Then in section B, we've looked at the impact of COVID on our substantive services there. And in some areas, for instance, income streams were negatively impacted. In some other areas, we actually benefited from people, for instance, staying at home and recycling and doing their gardens. So we actually increased our income in those areas. So at 3.8, there's a summary of the impact of COVID on the main impact of COVID on our budgets there. And you can see that we had underspend or surplus income totaling £820,000 there. Of that total, there is 266,000 which are due to slippage requests that are detailed in section 3.2, and that's where we couldn't perhaps undertake projects, but we would like to take them on and complete them in this financial year, and those reasons are detailed in section 3.2 onwards. And then in section C on page 44, that's really the outturn, what we probably would have had life been fairly normal on our substantive services there. And you can see that totalled over £1,333,000 of either underspend or surplus income there. And the reasons there are detailed. In particular, one big area there was the SIL admin levy. We actually received more SIL, and the 5% that we retained there as administration was nearly £400,000 more than we had anticipated. And then in 3.13 and 3.14, we actually, in terms of investment income, we received more investment income than we had budgeted for. And we also, though, didn't pay out any interest payable because we didn't borrow any money. So we actually made a saving there from what we had anticipated. So the table in 3.15 shows you the actual sort of total of the outturn position. We would, in addition to creating the earmarked reserve for the COVID funding, would recommend creating a new reserve for £750,000, entitled Environmental Projects Reserve, for us to fund potentially new projects coming forward over the next few years to deliver our environmental strategy there. And then in 3.22, just details the capital outturn there, and the funding that we've spent there. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Debbie. It's amazing how the funds have gone down, up, through the year. So it gives us a position as to where we stand at the coming towards the end of that year and where we go forward. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Jonathan or Trudy?
Yeah, again, seeing it in black and white, just how much has come in and gone out the door is actually incredible, the amount of work that has gone on. And I think it's the right thing to do regarding the slippage requests. I think that's the first time we've called that. So it took me by surprise a bit. But yeah, I think that's the right thing to do. There's projects that need delivering, and we'll see where we are once those are delivered, which I'm sure they will be. And I'm really thrilled about the environmental reserve we're creating, especially now we've got a new officer on board to really get her teeth into it and just come up with something really good for us. So no, I'm happy. I don't know when you want to do the recommendations after Sinead's part, I guess, because
it's probably
all
worth doing it
encompassing.
after that.
Yeah. But other than that, yeah, thanks very much. As again, so much detail in here, much gone into it. So thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Trudy. Sinead, did you want to do your part of this now?
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So the remainder of the report that you've got in front of you today sets out the performance of the council over the last quarter, and also sets out our year-end position of our delivery measures that were set out in our delivery plan for 2020-21. So at year end, there's a table just after 3.24 in the report that sets out our position with our delivery measures. So 12 of our measures at year end are green, which means that they have met our year end targets that we set and the expectations they set in our delivery plan. So just to give a couple examples of those measures, so our working days to process housing and council tax claims came in below our target of no more than 7 days, and at year end sat at 5 working days. And this is with an increase of over 70% in claims to that service and over 50,000 calls received throughout the year as well. Broadland also exceeded the strategic housing market assessment target for affordable homes. So that target was 96 at year end, and Broadland has delivered over 165 new affordable homes. Just moving on to the measures which are amber. So at year end, we have 8 measures. And this means that they've missed our year-end targets by a very narrow margin, and they'll continue to be monitored as we move into the next financial year. Council tax collection was just below our target of 98.9%, and at year-end came out at 98.8%, so just below. And we have had stronger than expected collection rate for our council tax, which is extremely positive given the challenges faced this year with COVID. Also sitting amber at year end is our recycling rate. So through Q1 to Q3, we have seen a decrease in our recycling rate, but this is a trend that's been seen across the country, and this is alongside an increase in the tonnage, the overall tonnage of waste we have collected this year. The recycling rate in Q3, which is the latest data we have available, is impacted by the seasonal variances of garden waste over the winter period, which brings our current average recycling rate to 50%, which still has Broadland continuing to have the highest recycling rate in Norfolk. At year end, there are 3 measures that are red, which means they haven't met our year end target, and close monitoring for these measures is now in place. So the first one to draw your attention to is collection of business rates. So at year end, this is below our target of 99% collection rate and is sitting at 96.7. And it's been impacted throughout the year by COVID, and there is a risk that the collection of business rates will continue to be impacted into 21-22. The business rates team, continue to work with economic development to support businesses where possible, and have also brought in additional staff to support this as well. The last measure to draw your attention to is our employment rate. So from 2019 to 2020, there was a sharp fall in our employment rate, and this is thought to be reflective of the first national lockdown. However, looking forward, the Bank of England have predicted strongest growth in our recovery from COVID, and the economic development teams continue to support businesses through a suite of initiatives, some of which you've heard in the recovery plan today, such as the Kickstart scheme and supporting our retail sector with the Click It online sales and delivery platform. 9 measures from our delivery plan have been baselines this year, so that means we've been gathering the data,
and we'll look to set targets for those as we move into 21-22 reporting, and we will report that to Cabinets in the Q2 up. In the report, there is a recommendation to streamline the reporting schedule to Cabinet and proposal to move to a 6-monthly reporting schedule, reporting to Cabinets in Q2 and Q4. This will mean the management team will still internally continue to monitor performance each quarter and liaise with portfolio holders on performance, but it's proposed that the formal reporting schedule will be done in quarters 2 and quarters 4. I'll pause there if there's any questions.
Thank you for that. Okay, so moving forward on those, is there any questions on the finance or on the performance elements? Did you want to come in first, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think it does highlight how well we have done as a council to see the black and white there of looking at our things. And I think it's very important for us to focus on all our positives, but also realise that we've got things that we've looked at that we are saying to ourselves, we need to keep an eye on that. But I would think that they're a position where other councils would be very pleased with those figures. So yeah, we've got it all there, and we've got the baseline coming in as well for next year, which will be very good to see on the more figures on the baselines. I think overall it really shows how well we have done in such a difficult year. And I think this report should be, it's very well put together, and it's clear that we've got a lot of work going on still, even in very difficult times.
Okay, thank you for that, Jonathan. Trudy, do you want to do the recommendations and then we'll go to questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, hang on a tick, Steve.
Yep. So I'd like to recommend Cabinet to agree to items 8.1 through to 5 on page 57 of the Cabinet papers.
Okay, thank you for that.
Do you need a second? I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Okay, sorry, you wanted to come in as well, didn't you? Sorry, Trudy.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to comment really on the council tax and the business rates. I think it's phenomenal that the council tax collection is only 0.1 down. I was really hoping we were going to go green on that, but we got away from red. With the business rates one, I think even that, I know I've spoken to Simon Quilter, and he did say actually we have been adversely affected by a couple of very large businesses becoming insolvent. So that hasn't really helped our cause. It maybe could have been better if it hadn't been for that. But as Sinead says, we have agreed extra resource now into that to try and improve recovery. And we can also now obviously go back to courts, which we haven't been able to do through the pandemic. So I hope that the recovery rate will lift a bit. But I appreciate going forward, it's still going to be really, really difficult. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Trudy. Yeah, I think as with others, what this is showing is just what an amazing team the One Team is in the way that they've worked despite what they had thrown at them through the period, and to get so many of the measures green is very good. As I say, unfortunately we do have 3 red ones, and unfortunately I think, as has already been highlighted, I suspect those will still be affected as we go through the coming months. Just picking up on the recommendations, again, just as was highlighted by the finance portfolio holder, I think the word slippage is a new one for us. We would normally refer to that as carry forward, but happy that slippage is an alternative version of that. After all, it is a brave new world, so we'll try anything out. Just looking at the recommendations, I just wanted to pick up one in there, particularly recommendation 3, which refers to the reporting schedule and the dropping of the reporting at quarter 3. The rationale or the reasoning behind that is that quarter 3 reporting invariably turns out to be in February and March, as we're looking at Q4 outrun. So we end up finding ourselves looking at an out-of-date report when we're focused on the year end at that point in time. So it would seem that that's something that just confuses as we go through that. And it was something we found this year as we were, again, looking at things in that way. Historically, with our performance reporting, it has been at Q2 and Q4. We gave it a go last year, as was asked of us, and we'd now asked for that to revert back to how it was previously at Q2 and Q4. Obviously, it doesn't mean that we won't be watching things. Obviously, myself as leader gets regular updates, as do each of the portfolio holders on the activities going on in their areas. So effectively, the report itself would be disappointing if that's where the issues were flagged up originally. And I don't think that would happen. Okay, so they're the different bits. Now, is there any questions or any comments from members of the Cabinet? So Joe and Fran?
Yes, I just wanted to comment. In a recent Grant Thornton report, Broadland and South Norfolk councils were in the top 5% of councils expected to bounce back well, which I think is very encouraging. Also, the business survival rates are on the amber indicator, as Trudy has suggested. We have the team has been really expedient in paying out the business grants. They couldn't have got them out any faster. And I particularly want to thank Simon Bessie and Paul Chapman and their teams for the exceptional work they did. Also, the business support team in the office, on the phone to everyone, they've been amazing. We have a business support paper coming forward, and that will also include startups as well and what we will do for them. The unemployment rate and employment rate is unfortunately on the red indicator. We've just had a skills and training paper come forward, and I hope that some of that will address the problems that we will see when furlough finishes at the end of September. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Fran?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just following up from what Sinead said about the housing team, I just wanted to reiterate really what a fantastic job they did under very, very difficult circumstances. So I think that's really important to highlight that. Also, one of the areas of slippage here is the disability or disabled facilities grants. And I'm pleased to say that we were able to carry that over into this year. And we got some additional monies, which we were able to look at how we use that money to actually get it out to support people quicker. There's a number of different things we looked at, but one of which some support that we're actually giving now is around long COVID, but also people with life-limiting conditions who before may have waited, well, probably till the point where they were perhaps dying or dead before we actually got through the paperwork. So we're actually managed to move things through quicker. So hopefully over the next year, as things are becoming easier, we can actually get out and support these people even better. Really, obviously, COVID got in the way last year and it made a massive impact upon the work that we could do to support these people. I just want to also make a comment about affordable homes. I'm really pleased to see that we've exceeded our target. And obviously, looking forward, I know where I live in Rackheath, there's quite a number of affordable homes being built as we speak, just around the corner from me. So I think that we're likely to exceed our target again in this current year. So I think that's really good, really positive, and I think there's obviously a number of other developments which will hopefully be coming on stream soon to support that. So I think lots and lots of positive, really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fran. Sue, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to bring to your attention, as well as the affordable home delivery and what good news that is, that in relation to the new homes that have been delivered, we're on target to make our quota for that one as well. And the percentage of planning decisions made in the statutory timescales, the team are doing really, really well. They're working extremely hard under a lot of pressure at the moment. And the fact that we've got 3 green smiley faces makes me really happy. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Any other? Judy?
Yes, I thought I really ought to record my pleasure actually of the recommendation in 3.16, the Environmental Projects Reserve, and I'm sure we'll be able to do some great stuff with that. And just sort of slight word of warning, the waste figures in collection are good, but however, it's the report, because of the way the data is reported to government, is a bit muddled in a way that some is Q3 and some is Q4. So we can't really do the final percentages, I think, until the Q4 figures are published by government. And I know also that fly tipping is a concern of people, but I'd just like to reiterate that really we have quite a low rate of fly tipping. Doesn't mean it makes it better, but we have, and it's about 3.3 fly tips per 100,000 head of population, compared to the east of England, which is 9.4, and nationally it's 17.3. So whilst we have too many, compared to other people, we're doing quite well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Judy. Okay, I had a couple of bits I just wanted to pick up on as well. As I say, the report is well structured and has moved forward well, so very pleased with the way that looks. Just a couple of things we need to pick up on or resolve moving forward is probably around the staff sickness one, again, just because that caused some confusion as that comes through. And I'm pleased to see that the customer satisfaction survey element is now moving forward, so we should start to see that reported soon. As with the food hygiene, was on the baseline list, and again, we've got results on that, so hopefully that can move forward. And just picking up on what the portfolio holder mentioned there around fly tipping, while it's good news, I would like to see the target more aspirational than set at the level we've been seeing. So I'd quite like to say, can we go for 500? And let's bring the number down rather than leave it up. But that's something I'd like to see in there. But as I say, we can work those things through as we start to go through the reports for the coming years. Okay, so any other, Steve? Sorry, Steve, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, just a couple of points on the amendments, suggested amendments around the recommendation, and you already preempted that, so I'm just picking up on that in a moment. First of all, though, just in relation to report itself, ONS saw it exactly this way, the Cabinet's seen it as well. Absolutely fantastic report, the detail, and over such a difficult time period as well. And it's I think become obvious to a number of members just how difficult circumstances were for officers, the stress of dealing with all of that, and the focus, and also the delivery on those business grants. I know firsthand from my community, it was absolutely superb. It was on the ball, and it was there and then when you needed it as well. But also on Trudy's point, again, ONS picked up on this about the members, the environmental project reserve, allocating those funds in that way to create that, to support those initiatives and the employment as well, is a fantastic thing for the council to be doing. It's right up there in terms of environmental policy. It supports the council's policies, and ONS commended that as well. I thought it was just worth flagging up. It's quite an important step, actually. And just in terms of the recommendations, there was a couple of minor amendments that was being suggested. The first one was that the long-term sickness, it was felt that may be helpful if that was also included, long-term sickness figures in measure 4, because once you look at long-term sickness figures, there may be some indicators there that perhaps the council needs to have a look at, maybe impacting the council and the reasons for long-term sickness. So ONS felt it might be beneficial to the council if long-term sickness was also recorded as well. And then just in relation to the point that you mentioned there, that you covered as well, in terms of the Q3 reporting, the question was asked at ONS about the reasons why, to try to understand why that had been left off, or that was no longer going to be reported in the same way. And I think that the response that you've given today, Sean, actually just clarifies that further than what it was on the day. It's no criticism to the officers, but it was actually mentioned, ask Cabinet as well, because you've clearly got a view in this. So I think that what we can take away from this is that from your point of view, there's a slippage in terms of the data being sort of out of date in relation to that, which is what you were saying, and therefore that's your reasoning as for not including Q4, and therefore it's not critical. I think that's what you were saying, Sean. So that further explanation actually covers, I think, the point from ONS. And that's about it. Oh yes, and if Cabinet would consider also recording long-term sickness within the figures.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. I think we've covered most of that. I've flagged up, as you said, around the reporting and where Q3 was distracting from Q4 as such at that point in time. So we got hung up on the wrong things at the wrong point in time. So thank you for understanding that. And yes, around the sickness one, I think we just need to generally look at that and see how that measure is used and get that into the right place so that it takes some of that confusion away around what's long-term, short-term, and how that works. And I know that's on the list of being looked at as such. So that one will be worked through. And like you, I'm very pleased to see the environmental fund being created. Now, as I say, we've got our environmental strategy. We've got someone in post. We have an action plan being formulated that we want to see some traction on, and gives us the opportunity now to move forward in a whole host of different ways. So I would imagine there'll be lots of people knocking on your door, Judy, to work out or see what they can twist your arm around directing your focus on for different bits of that. So that's good to see. Okay, any other questions or comments anywhere? No? Okay, so that brings us back then to the recommendations at the top of page 56. We've got recommendations 8.1 through to 8.5, which have been proposed and seconded. So all those in favour, please.
It's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, James. Okay, so that moves us on then to item 12 at page 99, which is the empty homes policy. Is this down to you, Mike? I will hand over to you then, please, if you could introduce it for us.
Thank you, Chairman. And I've got Kevin with me tonight as well, for the technical expert. This is the first report coming tonight in Councillor Weimark's portfolio. Is looking to keep Broadland a safe and pleasant place to live, and by offering support to residents, but also not being afraid to bare our teeth and bite when needed. The reason it's coming tonight is a change in legislations means that we now have to offer to purchase a property before we take enforcement action. This potentially increases the financial risk to the council, which is why we need to bring it to Cabinet to review. Broadland has one of the lowest levels of empty homes in Norfolk, 0.6 compared to the Norfolk and English average of 1, so it is low. However, empty homes can be unpleasant to live next to, and they can provide opportunities for crime and antisocial behaviour. There's always a story behind empty homes. It's not, no rational person leaves a property empty. Anyone in this room, if they were suddenly gifted a property, would either sell it or they would rent it out to release the funds. Therefore, enforcement action is time consuming and resource intensive because they've got to deal with the issues and the story behind that. The aim of the report tonight is to encourage homes back into use as soon as possible, and if we can speed that up, and to do that through advice and incentive first. So you'll notice in the report that the council tax premium at 3.7, it shows an increase of up to 300%. So additional charge over time, just to encourage that owner to bring the property back into use. We're looking to continue with the renovation fund, as Broadland has done for a while, that interest-free loan to support that property and support that owner to free up and bring back in use. So we can do that first, and we can encourage. If we have to go to enforcement, there's two routes. We can either go with a compulsory purchase order or the empty dwelling management order. And the former is to buy and then sell or rent, and the empty homes management order is to take over and then we rent that property. Now, the legislation is very invasive. We are effectively ordering someone to give us their home. So we need to really think and go through a proper procedure before we do that. And so the way we're proposing to go forward, similar to what Broadland done in the past, so to complete a community impact assessment first, then you'll notice that in Appendix B, to ensure the issue is really big enough for us to take this evasive action. We'll have a points-based system in place, and to ensure that those who only reach a figure of 700 will be considered enforcement action. So we can demonstrate an audit trail of actually we've gone through all the different issues, where that property is, the risk of crime, antisocial behaviour, etc. Oh, hello. I'll just a little song here just to make sure it works. Is that all right? Don't know what happened there. Either that, Chairman, or you're thinking, actually, if I do this, Mike, you're going to speed up a bit. I don't know.
I'll say, if you want to hum it, I'll see if I can guess it.
Name that tuning one. So we'll do that community impact assessment first. We'll also do a financial impact assessment as well, and that financial impact assessment will make sure that, as well as a community impact, it's also a reasonably viable proposition for the council to take forward. To protect the council, we'll be looking to if properties go forward, then we'll be looking to start procedure on a maximum of 2 properties a year, which will further then minimise the impact of the council's budget. So really where we're going tonight is asking the council if they're agreed to set a reserve fund, and there's a change to the proposal, partly through my lack of working out, but of 600,000. And the reason 600,000 is because the average property is 290,000 in Broadland. So times that by 2, and it makes it 600,000 rather than 500,000. And then a fund of 50,000. So this is a fund. This isn't a guarantee every year. This is a reserve pot that if we have to, and we offer that property and we do incur those costs, we can draw on those funds. But it may be that some years that we don't need those funds, some years that we do. So, and that money agreement is really, we haven't got an endless pot of money, so that gives us an indicated figure of actually, if we're spending more than that, then we need to we can reevaluate to whether we actually go down this route or not. So those CPOs and those EDMOs will all be coming to Cabinet. So there's a chance for us at Cabinet to chew over about whether this is a viable option. So we can look at the impact assessments and just to see whether it's a good use of our resource. So I think for me, this approach, if we go down this route, will ensure that we have a full audit trail, we protect the council's purse to a reasonable amount, but we also have a proactive enforcement policy that actually makes a difference to our communities. So if I leave it there, Chairman, and myself and Kevin, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Fran, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I fully endorse this policy. I think it's a good balance of support and ultimately enforcement if and when necessary. Obviously, as you say, due to case law, we needed to reevaluate how we approach this, and I think this is the right approach. As Mike has said, this does give us leverage. Well, I mean, the council tax, increase in council tax that we're using now is leverage to actually get people to do things of their own free will. Taking out a compulsory purchase order or an empty dwelling management order is a last resort, and it is absolutely a last resort. But as I say, due to the situation legally now, we have to be in a position to actually make an offer if necessary. So yeah, I'm happy to endorse this and the recommendations as are on page 1.3. What I'd like to propose is a slight amendment to them. It's 8.1 as is, Cabinet to approve adoption of the empty homes policy. 8.2, Cabinet to agree proposal that Cabinet provides approval to seek to undertake empty dwelling management orders, EDMOs, and purchase orders, CPOs, processes on a case-by-case basis. So therefore, we'll have oversight. The only thing I'm looking to change or amend, as I say, is 8.3. So the 8.3 would be for Cabinet to approve creation within the 2021-22 financial year of a reserve fund of 650,000. And that would be in order to undertake a voluntary offer of purchase as part of a compulsory purchase order, and or housing standards, to enforce housing standards as part of that CPO or EDMO. So that would be the amendment there. So I'll move that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fran. So if I've understood that correctly, you've effectively what you've done is put the two funds together
That's correct,
and just
Chairman.
increase the
Yeah.
value to 650,000.
Yeah.
Yep.
If that's acceptable, to perhaps the Director of Resources might say that's not, but as long as she's happy with that being in the reserve fund. Thank you.
I better ask her, hadn't I? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine, Chair. We will make an earmarked reserve and move it from the general fund reserve.
Thank you for that. Okay, so any questions or comments on that? Jonathan, followed by Trudy.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. There's always a case in all these situations where and it does seem to me that the cases are all very different. I used to investigate all empty houses in Thorpe St Andrew, and there was a situation where you went from an older relative passed on, so that someone had that property and they were thinking either about moving into it or doing it up and selling it, so that used to take them forever. And I used to find that interesting, that it would be taking them longer than 2 years to do anything. There was a flat that was part of an old pub that was going to be demolished. So with that, nothing was ever going to happen with that property because the pub was going to be demolished and the flat and everything with it. So I found that very interesting. But every case was slightly different, ranging from a case where it was someone had built a property next door because they were going to move into it and then decided they weren't going to move into it. So that is a, completely different situation. I found that councillors, local knowledge would be very helpful on these things, where obviously it's, you ask the neighbours what happened to the people in that property, and then you find out that information and you find out the son's in Australia. So that's why it's taking the time. So I think every one is completely different. And I think putting this all in place is a really good idea, but I don't think we'd need to ever get to that full purchasing of it, because obviously by asking the questions and obviously by the costs increasing, I think people will always try and sort things out. And it might well be that it's taking them time, but then by us getting involved, it will mean that we've said, we will compulsory purchase order if we need to. Therefore, can you sort things out a bit quicker? And I think that will increase people's time to do it. And I think that's what we need to be looking at, that it does sound like we'll be spending quite a lot of money, but we won't, if you know what I mean, because I don't think we'll ever get to that point. I think people will sort themselves out quicker. So I'm happy with all of this. But one question I do have for the team is, councillors used to get the empty homes list every month, and we aren't getting that. And I would really like to see councillors get that again, if that is at all possible.
Okay, thank you for that, Jonathan. Trudy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Mike actually for consulting with me on this because of the finance side of it, because it looks like big numbers and the way of approving it before was a bit messy. So I'm pleased to see that it will come back on a case-by-case basis to Cabinet. So thank you for contacting me regarding that. And then finally to Fran, thank him for his amendment so that we're not putting 50,000 per annum into the base budget. We've just put the one-off reserve in rather than have that keep going in every year being built in. So thanks for that.
Okay, so thank you for picking up those points. Again, I think Jonathan hit the nail on the head there. With each of these, there's always a reason, and there's a whole host of different reasons why we find things in different places. Sometimes it can be emotional ties. Sometimes it can just be haven't got the time or the funding. And again, there's a whole host of support that we offer to enable those things to come forward. I was impressed with your scoring metric. So that was a good way to get priorities. So I'm not sure you could have made it any more complicated, but that's not a challenge. Also, the element there of the funds are recycled. So again, that works. But likewise, as this comes back to Cabinet, if we find ourselves in a situation where the funds have been exhausted, that does then create the opportunity for more funds to become available, should that deem to be necessary. And of course, because it's an indicative number, well, who knows what number we do or don't need. So it sort of deals with all of those things. And I think we probably just need to take forward Jonathan's point about the empty homes list and work out what we can and can't do with that and how that can be better positioned going forward for the future. Okay, so Steve, I think I saw your hand up. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was just to say that the recommendation that was before ONS on 3 bullet point 3 was for 500,000, but Mike quite rightly went through in a robust way why he then considered it should be the 600. So ONS completely concurred with this once Mike had gone through it, and in terms of the safety mechanisms for the council as well. So that's why the ONS recommendation is also concurred that the officer's recommendation was actually revised to 600,000, which was dealt with, I think, properly at ONS, because we could have dealt with that in a completely different way, which would just confused everything. So so ONS completely endorsed that position.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Steve. Fran?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to come back on Jonathan's point about the empty homes data. It is actually in the policy on page 123. It's on page 8 of the document as such, but it's 123 in our papers. The elected members will be provided with numbers of empty homes at town/parish level as part of quarterly performance reporting. This will be properties empty for longer than 2 years, and for total numbers, it will not identify individual properties, obviously due to GDPR at the moment. So it is there in the policy. Okay, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for finding that. And perhaps the transformation and organisational development portfolio owner might want to find out why he's not getting it from his own area. But yeah, we just need to pick up as to why that's not coming through and why.
It's not been coming through, and some parish councils have raised that. So
yeah,
obviously now we'll start moving that through. Thank you.
Yeah, we just need to be careful where it's used and how it's used. So I think that's the issue, which I think Jonathan was raising there. There is value add, but we just need to be careful and appropriate in the way that it's used. So, okay. So no one else. So we have recommendations on top of page 113, 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3 as amended. Yep. Okay, so we go to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you for that, James. Okay, so that moves us on then to homes in multiple occupation discretionary activity policy. And is this you again, Mike?
It is, Chairman. I'll try and find a snappier title next time.
Well, make it a bit longer if you want.
Okay, so this is the second report tonight for Councillor Weinmark's portfolio. Licensing HMOs is a statutory function for the council, and it ensures that landlords provide a safe home for tenants. Through COVID, we've identified additional unlicensed HMOs in Broadland, mainly through COVID outbreaks and migrants and working in meat processing factories. So we know we've got more to do. We've also, this is part of the Norfolk Adult Safeguarding Board's programme about Norfolk has really been, I think, slow to understand the problem, particularly migrants. There's more migrants out there in HMOs than we thought. And so part of this purpose of this paper coming forward now is to come forward and seeing if we can get on top of this issue early. The consequence of not being proactive are increased abuse and exploitation, worse living conditions for our poor residents, and potentially reputational damage for the council. We're responsible for licensing HMOs. And just always example that we use, you get a fire above a takeaway in a flat, an HMO. You know, the question we'll always be asking that safeguarding report is whether Broadland did enough to identify that property in the first place. This policy does have the potential to cause more work if we have to displace tenants. However, the aim of this policy is to always improve the accommodation of tenants, not to move people out of it. So the only time we would ever move tenants out of a property is if that property was so bad that living conditions that we had to move out. What we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage tenants to encourage landlords to act in a responsible way. And through licensing their policy or licensing their accommodation, what they're doing is they're buying into standards of electrical, plumbing, etc. We've begun the work, as you can see through the report. We've identified additional unlicensed HMOs. We've begun to do the work to go through that backlog, and we've already licensed 6 across South Norfolk and Broadland. And the idea is that this paper will help to speed up this resource or speed up this licensing process to make sure we don't fall behind again. So the proposal is to refresh the policy, increase the resource in this area to ensure that we have a proactive approach, and we repurpose a current vacancy to beef up our enforcement role. So as I say, we're there to ensure that we offer support and we encourage those properties to come forward and be licensed, and we will be having a proactive campaign in Broadland to be able to do that. And whereas before perhaps we've gone down the licensing rather than enforcement route, by having a proactive campaign, say, look, come on, buy into what we're trying to achieve here, and we will support you, take us on, and then you suffer the consequences. Cabinet will note that as well as the additional vacancy we're going to repurpose in the COVID money that we've been asked for additional posts, which would be a temporary post just to get us ahead of the game. And Worcester Resources will work. This resource will work across both districts. South Norfolk Council have identified 43 unlicensed HMOs, Broadland only 11. So actually working on the principle of 2 district areas roughly having the same number of HMOs, same number of residents, then actually we've got to do more work in Broadland to identify where those HMOs are that we haven't found yet when we haven't identified. So it's going to take more work in Broadland, but I think that's work that's valid. So just to sum up, these changes will provide us with the resources and license to support those landlords who wish to run safe HMOs, but to give us a resource and the teeth to tackle those who want to take us on and reduce the quality of life for residents. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Fran?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I welcome this report. As Mike said, this is a discretionary function. It's something we don't have to do, but I think if we look at it in the round, then this is about supporting vulnerable people in our area. I think Mike made an important point right at the end there, which may be easy to miss. But as Broadland and South Norfolk are very similar areas, it's highly likely that we've got similar numbers of HMOs. However, the number that are actually identified in Broadland are actually very low in comparison. So this proactive role, could well identify quite a number. I think we need to look at this holistically, really, as a whole council function. I mean, this person will perhaps work as part of the early help in some regards. But also, I think most importantly, this sends a very clear message to landlords that if you come to Broadland or South Norfolk, we want you to be registered. We want you to run a HMO which is actually suitable for people to live in. We don't accept substandard accommodation for our residents, and we will offer support, but if necessary, move to enforcement action. So I think that's a really clear message that this paper sends from my perspective. So I think it's very much something we should support. And if you want, I'll move the recommendations now on page, what page are we? Sorry, 132, sorry. So 8.1, as it is, for the Cabinet to approve the adoption of the Housing Multiple Occupation Discretionary Activity Policy. As Mike said, it rolled off your tongue. And 8.2, I'd like to amend that slightly, just to reflect that the Cabinet will approve amending an existing vacancy from Band E to Band F, which will enable recruitment to the one FTE Community Enforcement Officer post. But just to remember that this is the Community Enforcement Officer will obviously be part of the one team and fulfil their role across both councils, with the cost split being 45 to 55%. Just to reiterate that within the recommendation, but also I'd like to add 8.3, which just to highlight the 0.5. It's just to say additionally a 0.5 FTE community enforcement officer will be in place for the next 2 years, funded through the COVID-19 Outbreak Management Fund, once again split 45-55. So that's what I'd like to move. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Fran. So if I've got you right, so the amendment, the additional on 8.3 was recognising effectively the text at 4.6, which relates back to
Yeah, it's
the
4.6.
additional half of FTE for 2 years, funded through the COVID-19 funding.
That's correct, and it's in item 9 earlier. Yeah.
And sorry, I wasn't paying enough attention for 8.2. What was the change there?
It was just to reiterate that this was obviously a role that will be fulfilled across both councils, both Broadland and South Norfolk, and obviously with the cost split 45-55%. Just to be clear, as in earlier discussions. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so fair enough. But as you say, that's a member of the one team and it would be split in that way anyway. So yeah, no, that's okay. Fine. Any questions, comments, discussions? I know this is one that's gone round quite a lot and a number of conversations have been had. So I think we perhaps could bring those together here. So Trudy, do you want to go first?
I'm torn, really torn. And not because of putting the resource in, that's not for that reason at all. On the one hand, initially looking at it, I think straight away I'd think, yes, right thing to do. The more I think about it and reading the report and looking at page 131, the end of page 130, the implications, I actually think there are implications missing off there that had they been in there would have maybe encouraged more conversation, such as if, for instance, you found an HMO and the landlord decided, say I don't know, had 8 tenants and the landlord didn't want to engage and decided, right, I'll go down to under 5 so I don't need a licence. We've then got potentially people that would need to go into temporary accommodation or something. That could even, these are all might be's, but then most of this is, that could even result in them having no home, therefore losing their job. And I think those risks or implications should have been in the report to prove that it had been thought through, the consequences of what could happen. And unfortunately, they're not in there. And the other thing I would say, in the last 18 months, obviously, there's been a lot of officers out there working with residents. And as you said, they've identified HMOs. I believe there's 11 identified in Broadland and only 2 required a licence, and that's now happened. So even in this past 18 months, there's been more identified in South Norfolk than in Broadland from the numbers you've given. Now, in the past, obviously, we've always sought to educate, support, facilitate landlords. We haven't used enforcement, and that is open to us, obviously. So this is why I'm torn, because as I said, I don't think the possible implications have been thought through properly. And then I would also say, even on page 135 about working with other council departments, this officer would do that. Now, I would think surely we do that anyway. We don't need this officer to do that. Surely we would be informed by these other departments anyway. So I'm not sure. I'm just not 100% comfortable with this. And as I said, I just feel extremely torn with it, because I don't know if we're going to cause a problem or cause problems. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you for that. Trudy, Joe?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Councillor Wymark for changing the recommendations. I didn't feel that 8.2 gave any clarity because we were quite unsure whether that officer was just for Broadland or for the two areas, and I think it's right that he puts in 8.3 as well. But I do agree with Councillor Mancini-Boyle that I don't think the risks have really been thought through particularly well. I'm very supportive of the idea of the policy as stated in the document, and I would like to sort of ask Mike that in the first instance, when working with landlords, most landlords want to adhere to the rules. A lot of landlords who probably are not members of national landlords associations don't always know the fast changing regulation that is involved with HMO. So I'd ask our officer team to be educators in the first instance and enforcers secondly. So if I could just ask Mike about that, please.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Coulson, and certainly that's very much the ethos of Broadland, and certainly I've inherited that from Kevin in terms of, these are businesses, and ultimately, as with all businesses, we want you to be the best you can be, and you're running, and I think a successful HMO is a valued asset in the community. It helps provide support, and we focus on migrant workers, but there's students and all sorts of other accommodation HMO. So I think that will, I can give. Here we go again. It will be very much. There'll be there would be a proactive approach. We will actively encourage. Look, come forward. The actual licenses is relatively cheap for the amount of rent that you get. Come forward. If you come forward, you actually get all the support because it is a fast changing environment, and many landlords don't necessarily have the skills and what have you. So we can give you the advice, we can give you the support to run a successful HMO, and rather than enforce away. So we're only looking to enforce those who are deliberately flouting the rules. And I think as an assurance, and I accept Councillor Mancini Boyle's point completely. Perhaps we should have added that in. And I think certainly that where we enforce because landlords are taking the mick and they are providing a unsafe environment. So the chances are you have got a choice, and we would have to move you out anyway because actually you're living in an unsafe environment. So there is a risk there, of course there is. But yeah, let's work with you first. Let's bear some teeth, and come on board with us. We'll give you the support. But if not, yes, we will take you on.
If I could also add to Councillor Mancini's question there and using the example of an 8-person HMO, if there was no danger to the residents, we wouldn't go in and say you need a license and you've got to evacuate 4 people. The time period we'd actually allow would be considerable for the actual landlord and to the actual residents to make a logical decision about their future if we didn't consider there was any danger. If you look at the enforcement policy that we put through in last November, it prioritises on engagement, and we're always in the role of engagement. Obviously, if there's danger, the risk is so high to the residents who live there, we have another decision process to go through. But if there's not danger, then we would go through a logical path with the actual landlord. And to lose 4 people's rent over a £595 bill over 5 years would be a strange one. But we would work with the landlord to make sure the best outcome for the residents and the landlord himself. So I just thought I'd put that in there.
Okay, thank you for that, Kevin. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, any other, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think my concern would be that we'd just be chasing our tail every time, because I believe that the kind of bad landlords we're talking about won't just have one property. They'll be doing these things, it won't just, because if it's someone who's just got an additional property, I think they would be aware of these things. And you do see that where people do find that, for instance, I know of a situation where it was a house next door that had the multiple occupation and they lived next door. And that was someone that they were sort of, they monitored themselves and they knew what was going on and everything. Now, with that, if we're talking about a situation where it's a bad landlord anyway, you might find that we go to that position where we say, they move it down to 5 instead of the 8 or 10 or whatever it is. But that isn't going to improve for those 5 just because we're not regulating it. That's still going to be the same for those 5. It's not going to improve it. But my thought would be that all we'll be doing is moving the people around. So we'll go to one property. They'll then say, right, we'll move 3 of them out of there and put them into that other property. We'll then have that one as 5. And then they'll go off to another property. Then they'll come back, say 2 months later. And that is the thing. They're just trying to make as much money out of them as they can. So I think we'd be constantly chasing our tail doing the same property. You go to one property, then 3 months later, you'd be back at that property again. And I'm all for the regulatory process, but I think that would need to be evident, people coming forward to us, not us going out and chasing these things, because I think we're just going to be constantly just chasing our tails, just doing the same thing over and over again. And I just think it is a bit of a drain on, something we don't need to do.
Okay, thank you for that, Jonathan. Sue?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that thank you to the officers for this report, and I do support this policy, and I will agree with 8.2 of the recommendations. I feel that Broadland should be seen to encourage landlords to be respectful to their tenants, to ensure that the homes that they're living in are safe and to a standard acceptable to the community that they're housing. It's there's many arguments against and for, but in my opinion, it's something that we should be seen to be doing. There's more reputable landlords out there at the moment, but there are a few that, as Jonathan and everybody says, are taking the mick, and we need to be seen as a district that we're going to say that it's not acceptable anymore. You have to treat people with respect, and they need to make sure that the homes they're living in are safe, clean, and warm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Sue. Anything for anybody else? No? Okay, so just going back through the different things that I've heard, and I think picking up on Sue's point there, yeah, not all landlords are bad, so there are predominantly good ones out there, but there are a few bad ones as well, which this is about trying to deal with some of those aspects. And also the thing you need to look over here is that we are doing our statutory obligation at this point in time, and we are doing that well. So we are licensing appropriately, and Mike and Kevin and their teams are doing that in the right way. And we have, as previously said, talked about bringing some resource in to help deal with the licensing and the backlog of that. So this is now looking at the discretionary element of that, which is in a slightly different place. And I think the words that have been used today is referring to that as an approach that Broadland's always taken, which is around engagement, education, support, compliance, and then, as Kevin threw it in at the end there, prosecution, because we will do that. And there is, fortunately, I think we've not probably found ourselves at the need to do that as yet, but I may be corrected on that one. The element we did pick up here was that there was, through the work over the last 18 months, as there was 11 additional HMOs have come to light, and effectively of those that were issued, or all 11 were issued with the Section 235 notice. And as an outcome of that, I understand 2 of them had a requirement to be licensed, which has happened. I believe the others will require more investigation to ensure that what has been fed back to us as good landlords is correct. Hopefully they fall on that side of the fence rather than the other side of the fence, and we find out what they've told us is not quite right. Picking up Jonathan's point around perhaps the moving around. again, I think that there is an element here around cause and effect. So we just need to be mindful for actions we take will have a cause and therefore will have an effect. And I think, again, Trudy mentioned those earlier on around the risk aspect and the impact that they will have, which will cause additional work or has the potential to cause additional work, and also the potential to cause additional cost linked to that. But as Mike said, there's an element in there where those things, as we pick them up in the process that we run through now, we would deal with that in that way anyway. But moving forward, the proactive element here is going out looking for and trying to find these places. So I think I've picked up all of the comments that were made. We have before us the recommendation at the top of page 132, 8.1 as is. 8.2 has been amended just to clarify the relationship there, working across both districts and as part of the one team. And then 8.3 with the addition of the recognising the COVID funding additional resource that's being brought in as outlined in 4.6. I think I've covered everything there. Excellent. Okay, so that gets us to, unless there's any other comments, we can go to the vote. No? Okay, so all those in favour? All those against? 3. So that's carried. And 1 abstention, was it? No. 3 against. Oh, sorry. And 4. Yep. Okay, so that one's carried. So that moves forward based on the recommendations there. And we look forward to seeing the outcomes of the discretionary activity policy. So that's good. Okay, so that brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. It's great to see everybody, as in literally see everybody, as opposed to look at you on a screen. It feels very different. But I say thank you for your participation tonight, and have a safe journey home. I haven't said that for a long while. Make sure you stay safe and look after yourselves. Thank you again, and close the meeting.